Hey everyone, welcome back to the Take It Apart channel where we explore the facets of everyday items, and today our victim is going to be a Nerf Rival. This is probably one of my favorite Nerf guns of all time because it's accurate, is relatively free from defects, and you can troubleshoot problems in the field. Man, I make my kids scream with this guy right here because I am absolutely surgical with it. It's a spring-loaded, manually cocking Nerf gun that shoots the Rival bullets, which are these little foam balls, and man, do they work a treat. Extremely fast. They don't hurt, and you know, overall, it's just a fantastic Nerf gun. So today we're going to take it apart. We're going to see how it works. There's a few things that I'm a little bit curious about, and there are some manufacturing problems with this guy where it doesn't index correctly. Maybe we'll take a look at that, especially when the magazine up here is especially full. This guy doesn't want to orient itself correctly. Sometimes you just have to tweak it a little bit in order to close the action and get the next round off. It's a pretty good Nerf gun. I absolutely love this guy. So let's go ahead and let's take it apart. It uses #1 Phillips throughout the entire cavity. That's good for us. So let's go ahead and get right in it. First thing, I'm going to take the cocking mechanism. We're going to remove it. It has some pretty long but smaller Phillips screws. This right here is where it would be really nice to have a motorized #1 Phillips screwdriver, which I think I have someplace. Okay. All right, so it appears to be a dovetail track up here that it rides in. You can see it glides back and forth effortlessly. And these right here, they're cammed, or they're an incline in one direction. So this will ride over it if it has to, and then it grabs on the other side. So it's canted in this direction. So if you had to slam it past it, it'll go past it, and then it'll catch so that you can open up the magazine tubes. Interesting. Okay. Yep, so this guy has a little bit of a dovetail right here. Now, this gun has gotten excessive wear and tear, so I could see that I'm gonna have to put a little bit of lubricant up there and in that dovetail to make that smoother action. Overall, pretty durable. I dig it. You can see all the spring-loaded magazine tubes. Yep, it just kind of pops out. Yep, plastic on plastic wear. And it looks like down here at the bottom, there is a spring-loaded piece. Okay, to catch that guy right there. All right, that makes sense. The barrel has a button that you can press to open up, and that allows you to clear your jams. And you have a piston assembly back here with a plunger, and that plunger actually opens up the air reservoir. So normally, if there's no bullet there, it's a dry fire. And to prevent excessive damage, this little plunger right here closes off the air chamber to dampen it. So because I have this guy open, it's not going to work as intended. Let's keep going. The spring-loaded what is this guy back here? The spring-loaded piece that is going to load and unload it back here. Yeah. And I don't know what this little catch is back here. It's the first time I think I've ever really noticed that. And I normally notice everything on these things. Okay, we'll figure out what this guy is. So you can't push it forward until you go all the way back. And that is one of the design problems with this one, because if this magazine doesn't orient itself correctly, it won't pull all the way back, and thus you can't push it forward, and thus it won't fire. So you have to grab the magazine and manually rotate it to index it, and then you can push this to close. All right. Now these are all plastic screws. It's plastic on plastic. So when these screws go back in, you have to rotate them in a counterclockwise fashion until you hear it bump, and that is the screw running over its old grooves. And once it runs over its own grooves, then you can run it typical clockwise to tighten it, so you're not cutting new threads. I'll show you that when we get to it. Okay, so it looks like I can see the mold marks on these. Believe it or not, Nerf has some good molds. It's kind of crazy. It looks like this is just PVC, but Nerf has some really solid molds, a lot of detail. It's like one of the things that they've been known for. Okay, we got one more screw right here. Now, I've never taken one of these apart before, so this is going to be a treat for me as well. Okay, so there is a little catch. It sits right back here, and it does have its own integrated spring. All right, so that is what this guy's for. Interesting. So that guy sits right back here, like so. And it just rotates on a hole, and there should be a dowel pin. It looks like there's a pin that fits right back in here. I don't really know what this is for. Probably just for strength and support when you pull it back, because as you pull it back, it becomes a lever, and you know, it's much easier to flop a lever around. You can see this entire mechanism is held in by 3 little screws. You got one here, and there's a screw or something that goes back here. Maybe it's just a plastic pin. I beat the heck out of this thing, and to think that those little screws are all that it has. Oh yeah, the third fastener is going to be up here at the top. Okay. Yep. There's 3 points of contact that allow that guy to open. And that spring is very stiff on this guy. So one of the crazy things about Nerf is they layer plastic on top of plastic. They're absolute masters of having this layered approach to their design. You don't really see that very often. Normally they try to make everything out of one type of plastic as possible. It smoothens out the build process and the bill of materials and the amount of molds that you have to make. Nerf says screw that. Design is one of our key features, and we are masters of plastic. So there you go. They have no problem with making smaller pieces and adding screws. Like this little rail up here at the top. Necessary? No. But it is a key piece of their design. Yep, that's a whole separate piece. I'll show you something else that I've noticed about Nerf, particularly. See how they got plastic in plastic, like this right here on the grip? You can see it also back here. The interesting thing about that is they use the structural component of one to bolster the next. It's a real odd design choice because, like I said, it increases the complexity of the molds. But they're just absolute masters at it. It does make a very cool looking toy gun too. Makes it very industrial looking. And you can see right here exactly what I'm talking about. See how this piece just fits right on there? Does not actually serve a physical purpose. It's just for design. They could have actually molded that out of one piece of black plastic and saved them 3 fasteners and some complex mold. Nope. This is injection molded. You can see the push pins that push it out of the mold. Fascinating. There's a blind fastener right here. It's hidden by that cover so you can't see it. So if you don't take that cover off in that order, you'll never see this fastener that I'm currently taking out. One of the other things I've noticed about Nerf particularly is the fit and finish. And when I said they're masters of plastics, normally when you take plastic injection molded components, there's going to be seams, and when you got two clamshells like right here, you got left and right hemisphere on this guy. Now you're going to have two clamshells that meet together, and this seam is usually not matched up correctly. Now I can pull a whole bunch of examples of that. It's just an odd thing that they're so good at making their molds. It's so precision machined that they match up perfectly, absolutely perfectly. There is maybe a quarter or an eighth of a millimeter, maybe a lot less than that, worth of difference right here on the seam. And that makes an easier grip on the hands. Now, I don't see any marks where it's been machined or scraped by hand, because sometimes when there's flashing at those edges, they'll take a knife and they'll scrape it. That way there it's nice and flush, but they'll leave scratch marks and it's evident. This is clean and it's shiny. No real evidence whatsoever of somebody taking a flashing knife and cleaning this. Just Nerf are geniuses when it comes to plastics. It's fascinating. Extremely complex designs. Durable. I mean, come on, you know kids beat the heck out of these things. But you don't really hear too many complaints about Nerf guns breaking. They've kind of solved a lot of those problems over the years. All right, so let's see. I have both these clamshells, all those fasteners. And I have all the magazine tubes full. I would like to separate the front part, because you can tell that that's an assembly. It's definitely held right here, and it's definitely held up here. And I would like to not have to take those apart. I want to separate all these spring-loaded magazine tubes and the rotating magazine. I want to separate that from the cavity, the main gun. I don't know if they'll let me, so let's see. Any fasteners on the back side? Doesn't look like it. I've got a couple up here on the barrel. Now during our Nerf battles, which me and my kids, we do reasonably often, I have had some jams, and I have had to open this guy up and clear out some, because sometimes you'll get the damaged Nerf balls and stuff, and I mean, that just happens. Plus, I don't always use like OEM or Nerf brand Nerf balls. I use some Amazon generics too. And the good thing about the Amazon generics is some of those are a little bit more rigid. Let's see, I don't know if I have any examples of those in here. Oh yeah. So this one right here is an original Nerf, and you can tell because of its durometer, which is its stiffness or its flexibility. It's much softer than the Amazon, which I believe has the B on it right there. They're much more stiff, which means they generally fly, say, a little bit better. Maybe the density is a little bit higher. But at the same time, the Amazon brand, they hit a little bit harder too. I don't know about you guys, but kids like to cheat. They like to cheat. And even though you hit them, sometimes they'll act like you didn't. Well, if you hit them with one of these ones, they generally will sit there and complain about it for a second, and they're ratting themselves out that they got hit. It's a win. That's a parenting win. Okay. I'm using this tool here to separate the two clamshells. And Nerf uses a whole lot of indexing pins. A lot of them. I can feel them everywhere. Interesting design choice. The safety right here which disconnects the firing pin on the trigger. It has a screw that holds the two clamshells together. So I couldn't pull it apart right there. And I looked and I seen why. It's because there's yet another screw on the safety. Wow. Okay. All right, very carefully take a look at the underside. Now look at the complexity of this. Like I said, they have plastic over plastic supports, and they have some rolls that hold the two together, and those components are also what's holding these internal mechanisms centered in the toy. They've got a lot of snap latches that are holding the plastic on plastic. You can see it right here. A lot of that kind of stuff. I have a spring. Why is there a spring there? There is a spring right here on this guy. I have no idea why that guy even exists. I mean, that would definitely add to the bill of materials. Oh, it's probably some sort of catch for this guy. We'll figure that out very carefully. This is the piston assembly that is spring loaded. So I'll see if I can load it very carefully and then discharge it carefully while it's apart. It could spring load this whole thing apart. Look at how rigid they've made this. That's a very complex mold, guys. Extremely complex. There's striations, which are little lines in the plastic that almost resemble a 3D printed part, but this is definitely injection molded, and those striations are from the mold. All right, so they don't have the smoothest machining on this side. Interesting enough, they did add some grease up here on the slide. So this is the cocking assembly slide. There is grease on there. So they have engineered this thing to some degree so that it will have some longevity. That's good. I see a plastic spring right here. Let's see. Okay. So that plastic spring right there is what indexes the safety. And the indexing of the safety is what allows the trigger to discharge or not discharge. Okay. And you can see right here the other safety on the other side, so they made it ambidextrous. Again, something that they didn't have to do, but they made the safety ambidextrous, which, attention to detail, Nerf, good on you guys, man. And I can also tell, without pulling this apart any further, that the way that this guy works is there's an inclined plane right here, and as you squeeze on the trigger, your release right here rides up the inclined plane. So there's a catch here on the bottom of the piston, and as it pulls back, that catch will activate right here on the sear, and then as it rides up this inclined plane, it pulls down on the sear, which is going to dislodge the latch and fire it off. Okay. Pretty interesting. So there's one spring right here. There's a plastic spring right here on the sear to return that in a quick fashion. Okay. Let's carefully take the trigger out. And let's take the sear, which has an extra long pin on one side and a short pin on the other with the plastic spring. I'll kind of lay them out sort of in the intended function. And let's see, here's the piston assembly, the magazine. Well, that was all pressed together. Okay, so this is the rotating magazine. Right, let's unload it completely. I think you guys understand the way that the Nerf balls sit in the magazine tubes. You can definitely tell the density difference between the non-Nerf and the Nerf. just, I don't know if they'll even show you on the camera. But yeah, one is definitely more squishy than the other. All right, rotating magazine. You can see that there is a hex pattern that is machined or molded into it. And there is one spot right here where the piston assembly is going to match up to it. There we go. And this is just a blocker plate so that only one tube at a time is activated. Nothing really special over here. I can tell you, interesting design choice. They have a spring-loaded piece right here that keeps all these balls in the magazine tubes. Huh, okay. Interesting. So when I put this back together, there's points like right here where I'm definitely going to put some grease. It's definitely gonna happen. All right, well, that's the gun barrel. There is one piece up in here. See this little piece of rubber that's on the inside of the barrel? I believe that that guy there is to put some spin on the ball. So when the ball comes out, it's going to hit that piece of rubber and it's going to put a, well, it would be a bottom spin. So as it's flying through the air, the ball is rotating like that as it's flying through the air. And I would guess that that would extend its range or increase its accuracy because the ball is now spinning instead of just flying wherever. Interesting take on maybe a lighthearted version of rifling by adding stability to the projectile. So this guy right here is the hex that is going to index your magazine. You can see how it fits in there, like so. Now I believe that what happens is you load the gun, it pulls this guy back, and it's going to rotate the magazine one notch if there are no balls in the current magazine tube. If there's no balls in the magazine tube, it will rotate to the next position. That's some complex engineering, but I dig it. This right here is fascinating. I don't know if I can open that up. This is the main spring that's pushing on the piston. Right here's the main piston. On most Nerf guns, there is a damper right here, and this damper, it won't fire the gun with full air pressure until a dart is loaded. Now on this one, I'm not really seeing that making much of a difference. It's just like a peg that indexes the ball. It doesn't really form the same function as you see on other Nerf guns. We'll take other Nerf guns apart in the future so that you guys can see what I'm talking about. But if there's no projectile loaded on other guns, it will very softly dry fire. That way there, you're not ramming the piston in this housing at full force. That produces a lot of shock, and the shock will stress plastics. So on this one, interestingly enough, all that I can see that that guy does is maybe index the ball a little bit better, centers the ball in the tube. That's all I can tell. There is one O-ring up here on the front. The piston has got a interesting rubber seal on it that's got some indents from being slammed into the base right here. It's got these indents that have been formed over time. And there is an internal O-ring right here. This is your main O-ring. So this creates like an umbrella seal. So as it's going forward, it kind of presses out from the air pressure and forces all the air out. It wipes the entire diameter of the piston sleeve, which is this guy right here. But the other thing that I'm noticing, it doesn't travel that far. So I'm gonna have to add some lubrication up here on this O-ring. I can tell already just by the debris that's on the O-ring. You can see some of the debris right there, that it is going to need some love. It's going to get some grease, for sure. This guy sits up in here, cocks back just a little bit, and so this sleeve right here, it's tapered. I can feel it. Like there's a lot of slop, and then it gets tighter and tighter down towards the end. If there was less slop, you would think that it would increase the air pressure and the velocity of the projectile. So what I think they're doing here is they're extremely limiting the velocity. This guy's got a lot more travel than it needs to have the velocity that it has, because a lot of that's wasted. There's some blow by because it's not tight fitting. Anyway, that's that guy. Oh, we have some debris down in here. Now this guy here appears to be just a support tube. I'll have to review the footage. It's not really doing too much. And this guy is the rotator. See it? As you pull it back, it rotates one position. Some genius engineering here. Very smooth, buttery smooth. Look at that. Very nice. So, everyone, improvements are to lubricate some of these rotating parts. You can get extra stiff springs if you want. And some of these other components that have some debris inside them, I'm going to clean that out thoroughly and figure out what's going on with those. And then I'm going to reassemble it. I should have taken a velocity check before and after. Luckily, I have more than one of these. I do have a velocity checker, so maybe I will do another video where we re-engineer this guy and figure out ways to make it a wee bit faster. That would be really cool. Only other thing worth noting, really, is there are some dampers that are built into the plastic. Again, adding to the complexity of the design right here. You can see that there's a polymer damper right there and right here. So when that barrel slams forward, instead of putting all that stress directly on this, what I'm assuming is polyvinyl PVC, I don't know, I don't see any markings on it. Instead of putting all that stress on plastic, which will create some problems in the future, they put some really low durometer, really rubbery substance right here. They're inserts that are also in like a T-slot. And when it comes forward, they absorb a lot of that shock from the piston. Very cool. Definitely built to last, oddly enough, saying that about a plastic toy. But Nerf is doing it right. This is a very complex assembly, and the people that are designing these things are absolute geniuses. So, guys, that is my Nerf Rival, and hopefully I get it back together, because I do use this guy routinely because I'm assaulted continually by my children. But that's it. I'm going to re-engineer it. We're going to do it better, put it back together. I'm going to go have a war. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you learned something interesting, because I know I did. I know that these guys are way more complex than what I was anticipating, and they're definitely built to last, which is also something I wasn't expecting.